Well, good morning, everyone. It's Kelly Stinefast with Coffee with Kelly, and today my guest is Matthew Jones with Jones Family Insurance. Matt, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So like Kelly said, my name is Matthew Jones. I have Jones Family Insurance. I have been in the Punta Gorda area for about 19 years now, and I started my own insurance agency 6 years ago. I got into it because I do legislative work in another line of insurance, bail bonds, and criminal justice, and I got into this, and I've been doing insurance since.
I didn't know about the bail bonds. That's got to be very interesting.
It is very interesting. I don't do so much of it anymore. We do the insurance side of it.
The insurance side of it. Yeah. And that's why I wanted you here, because of the legislative, and I can't say that word, people, side of things, because you know what's going on. You know what the pulse is. You know what's latest and greatest in insurance. And I think you are considered an expert in this field. So, Matt, what is going on up in Tallahassee?
Previous to our hurricane, we had two special sessions. One of them was in June, after last year's legislative session, when they tried to pass some more insurance bills, and they didn't pass enough because they found out when Hurricane Ian came around,
right,
that it was very catastrophic, and the governor didn't like everything that was in place, and so they went back in December and passed another bill called SB 2A, and that had, in my opinion, that had a lot of great stuff in there.
And what did that change or cover?
So SB 2A did a lot of stuff in the insurance industry. First and foremost, it stopped attorneys, one-way attorney fees, and kind of held back on that. And so right now, to try to help the average person understand, if you hire a public adjuster, that public adjuster can only take 10% of what the claim is. Okay, the attorneys, it could be the sky's the limit.
Okay, is
how it used to be. And so that right there, to me, was a really big thing with the carriers. And they would say, hey, you took us to court on a $50,000 roof, and now the bill's $400,000.
Right.
And the carrier would have to pick up the bill for it. So that's what you saw, carriers pulling back in the state of Florida, tightening up their guidelines, leaving Florida. Even a few years ago with the whole 10-year roof thing, when that was an issue in our industry.
That was a big issue in our area.
They passed some bills on that, some legislative stuff on that as well. And so that was a major thing. The one-way attorney fees really helped. The other thing up in Tallahassee that they did is that, because a lot of people were going to Citizens.
Right.
Citizens now, coming up, is going to require everybody to carry flood insurance.
Yeah, that's a big topic going on. I mean, why is that? That doesn't make sense. And that's going to cost people more money on their insurance bill, right?
Yeah, it is going to cost people more money. So, with you being a loan officer, right, a lender, already that if someone's in a flood zone, you guys are forcing them to carry flood insurance.
They have to have flood insurance, yes.
So that's not going to change, okay? But really, what it's doing is, for the people that were, didn't have a mortgage before and were going into Citizens, it's going to force them to get flood insurance, and it's because there's a lot of gray area when it comes to flood. In the insurance world, flood is considered 2 or more parcels or acres of rising water.
So this is perfect, because that was one of my topics that I wanted to go in, so we've kind of led into that. So now the people that are in the non-flood zones that are going to be required to have flood insurance, are they going to be able to get that through FEMA? Or do they have to get that through Citizens?
No, they'll be able to get it through FEMA,
okay,
which is the NFIP.
What is the cost on that now with the flood insurance going up like it has been?
So I can't really pinpoint a price for you
Right.
and say, hey, it's going to be $500, $600
Right.
because it all really depends on the area that you're in,
Okay.
in the elevation of that area. I will say this because that flood insurance has risen because of the way that they started recalculating things.
Sure.
The days of the $500 flood policies are far and few in between.
Right.
I would say if it's an X zone, which means you're not required to carry flood, you're probably looking at anywhere between like $900 to $1,100. I would probably say.
Wow.
Whereas before, right, 5-6
Right.
years ago,
It
it
was
used
like-
to be 5 to 7.
I want to say we were paying $5.95 for flood insurance, and I live in out in Deep Creek, and it's all green out there.
Yep.
So, although sometimes that green space does get a little high in the summer with all the rain.
Yeah, and just to give you a little idea of what, so I live in the River Club here
Okay.
in town, and we used to not be in a flood zone. We were in X zone.
Right.
FEMA came in and they remapped.
Yes.
And they said, hey, you're now in AE zone, which is probably true. We're pretty close to the harbor.
Oh, yeah.
So we're in AE zone. So before that happened and that took effect in December, all those the way it rated, the X zone in our area was $550 for my house.
Okay.
Okay. The new premium for my house, because I did it, I wanted to see, is now $1,149.
Wow.
And they put it in the AE zone. And so that was in an AE zone.
So, does it have to do with your elevation
Yep.
where you at? And let me ask you something. I noticed when you go to Charlotte County property appraisers, and the first you put in your address, and it shows a flood zone, and it'll show like 8 AE. Now, is 8 the elevation?
So 8 is where FEMA says that it will start flooding in that area.
Okay, so that would be that is pretty accurate because and I'm probably getting ahead of myself, but in the mortgage world, we used to always have to get, and in your world, we used to always have to get an elevation certificate. And then we were told we really didn't need to. It was based on other factors, like if your neighbor flooded, or I mean, you know better than I do what those factors were.
That happened because private flood markets, I always try to relate things back to real life so that people can understand.
Exactly.
So private flood markets about 4 or 5 years ago started coming into Florida, and they say, hey, we want to sell private. Why won't you let us sell private in Florida? And they got their way, and they came in. So they didn't necessarily do it by elevation certificate.
Okay.
What they did was data
Okay.
from what they gathered, and they said, okay, they took snapshots of different areas and said, okay, the flooding in this area and that area, and this is what it's going to be. So
Okay.
they didn't require a flood.
They didn't require.
So FEMA saw that, right? And they started planning this a long time ago. It didn't happen overnight.
Right.
And they changed their flood maps from like Virginia down to Miami. And so they said, well, we kind of like that. In every industry, codes change. Just think in the building industry, right?
Yep.
Things change,
And
guidelines
usually
change.
because something happens.
Correct. So they said, listen, we haven't changed the way we're rated in over 50 years.
Right.
So now, no, we're not going to force you to get an elevation certificate because we're going to take the data that we have, the snapshot area, kind of like private flood markets,
Right.
and that's how we're going to go.
Okay.
So you didn't need an elevation certificate. However, I will tell you that it is in your best interest to always get one.
Right.
Because I tell people, do you want a snapshot view of how you're going to be rated, or do you want exact points of how you're going to be rated? And so when I say that, they usually get an aha moment and they go and get one.
So that elevation certificate still is key in determining what your rate's going to be for flood insurance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I've never seen it hurt somebody.
Okay.
And if it did hurt somebody, we would go the other way. So we take the lesser of
Now,
the
if the seller were to still have their elevation certificate, say they bought the home 20 years ago, no good, get a new one?
Nope. So elevation certificates are good for the life.
Okay.
Okay.
Good to know.
And so I always tell people that when they're calling for quotes, I say, and here's kind of one better, especially with the new rating system.
Right.
The old rating system, as before December 15th,
Yes.
those rates, the way that it was rated is kind of grandfathered, that rating system.
Right.
Okay. And that's locked in. So I always tell the new buyer, hey, go ask your realtor if you can get that current owner's declaration page. Because what we can do is we can assume any NFIP policy.
Yep.
Anyone. Okay? We can assume that policy and you can be locked into the current seller's rate.
So that way, when it comes due the next year, you won't get as big an increase?
Well, you're on their rating system, and the new
Okay.
rating system, like we said, the old
Yeah.
rating system, right? The X zones were like $500-700.
Right.
Now now they're like 8 to 11. So that old rating system is still there. So as long as there's a policy hanging out somewhere,
Right.
you can attach yourself to that old rating system.
Right. Okay, that's good to know.
It's huge.
And because it is huge, and I know that I've done it with my clients. Hey, you're in a flood zone. See if your seller has that their policy, because we will allow them to assume it, and most lenders will allow you to assume it. I don't see why they wouldn't. The only policy you can't assume is their homeowners policy.
Yeah.
That cannot be assumed. You have to get a brand new homeowners policy. So, and with that being said, on the homeowners, we're seeing increases across the board now. People are saying, oh, it's because the hurricane came through. I mean, do you see that could be the case? I mean, I totally expect my insurance to go up next year because we had very little damage with the hurricane. So what's your view on that? What do you see coming?
So unfortunately, you know the saying, the good always suffer for the bad?
Yes.
It's kind of like that. Not that anybody did anything wrong. It was a catastrophic issue.
Catastrophic, yeah.
But the people that didn't file claims and have any damage, unfortunately, you were going to suffer for the people that did have claims and have damages. Whether that's fair or not, that's another day, another discussion, right? But we will pay for the losses that the carriers incurred. But I will say this, so there's a loss. Whenever there's a loss, how are people going to recoup money?
Right.
They have to raise their prices
Right.
somehow.
Right.
That's what happens. Look at the lumber industry,
Right.
right? Those
Right.
prices are through the roof. Supply and demand. Oh, you guys really need insurance? Okay, we're going to go up. We had losses. You want it from our company? We're going to go up. I will say this, because we track in my office, with renewals, we've typically been seeing lately between $3 increases at the lowest and about $600 at the most average.
Right.
Although the person that I have doing our renewals texted me, I just happened to be on my way here, and she was like, holy smokes, so-and-so's went up $2,400.
Whoa.
So I'm not going to say that it can't happen. It is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But-
Did they have a lot of damage?
I'm not even sure.
You don't even know.
No, I don't. The name didn't ring a bell for like
Right.
a claim.
Okay.
But I will also say this, is that some legislation that did pass too in that bill, we used to be able to file claims, you and I, all
Right.
the insureds, up to 3 years after a storm,
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
right?
Yeah.
3 years. So that's where you would get all, I'm sorry, but that's where you get all those bad roofing contractors that would go
Right.
through and say, I can get you a free roof. I can get you a
Yeah.
free roof. They just put it back to that storm.
Right.
Okay. And so the carriers stomped their feet on that and they said, hey, 3 years is way too long. So now it's only 1 year,
It's 1 year.
which I think is sufficient.
Yeah, because if you're going through your house, I mean, I initially did my claim, but then afterwards I noticed that something in the garage we hadn't noticed, and I had 1 year to get it in. And
Yeah.
done
So
that.
you actually, Once you file a claim, though, now, once there is a claim attached to that date of loss, they let you file a supplemental up to 18 months after.
Oh, that's good to know.
So that is good. It's not just like, hey, we're totally on the carrier side and we're gonna, screw over the homeowner. There is stuff in there that helps.
People think that they're those mean insurance companies.
They think so. I mean, listen, there are some.
Look at everybody who's lost with the, what was it, UPC or. That's a really horrific thing that happened to a lot of people in this area.
All over the state, and people ask me. That's a huge thing too. Is people ask me, is this insurance company good? And I'm a straight shooter. I will tell you this: if the insurance carriers in Florida are pretty much domiciled here. Progressive bought a company called ASI, so now they can do that. State Farm has opened back up their portal. They write a couple others. But as far as like the big names that you see nationwide, they're really not in Florida. So every carrier you see, when people call me, because a lot of people are transit, they're moving here from out of state.
Yep.
And I'm like, you're not going to see those national carriers here in Florida. Everybody's pretty domiciled here. And if they're writing, that just means that they passed an inspection from the state of Florida.
Okay.
And carry so much in their surplus.
Okay.
For what they have in exposure. So it doesn't necessarily mean, and I'm honest, I'm like, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're amazing, because look at UPC. They were probably like the second largest carrier.
Or it doesn't mean they're good.
In Florida. And they were good forever. They were the company.
Yeah. And
if they can go out last year, so I tell them this company's good right now, but I don't know their financials, and they reapply on a yearly basis.
Okay.
So I say for this year they're good.
So they have to apply on a yearly basis.
Right. So what happened last year with UPC? I don't know. I can't tell you.
Now, something you and I had talked offline here. You were saying that you're starting to see some of the insurance companies that had left the state starting to come back.
So you've seen with that bill that I think is amazing, again, SB 2A, it was a lot of good in there for the insurance companies.
Good.
Okay. And they liked it. And so what I feel is over the next 12 to 18 months, and I've already seen some of it starting to happen.
Right.
Even though we got hit here, it's a little tougher for us in this area right now because some of the carriers are still closed, sifting through their losses.
Right.
But as they start to open back up, I've seen guidelines within the carriers becoming a little more loose, open back up. And I have to say that I'm going to contribute that to the bill that passed.
Okay.
And I've also seen a couple brand new carriers come into Florida, open up, because they say, hey, we like what's going on now in Florida, so now we want to do business in Florida.
Good.
So hopefully with more carriers, that creates competition.
Yes.
And with competition, I think that within the next 12 to 18 months, we will see like a stabilized market. You won't see like massive $2,400
increases like
jumps
you're seeing,
like that.
and
like
with the
I saw
flood
that.
Insurance, yeah.
Well, the flood insurance is national, so that's
a whole
not,
different
That's
animal.
a different ballgame. But as far as the home carriers,
Something else I wanted to ask you. So anything latest and the greatest with condos or villas or townhomes? What's going on in that neck of the woods?
So condos before used to be very well underwritten. A lot of people took them. We had that tragedy last year on the other coast.
Right.
I forget the place
It's
called
over
now.
in Miami.
But they had that collapse. And so after that, carriers started to tighten up a little. And then after the hurricane,
yes,
it is very hard to write condos right now. I will say it's harder for me to write a condo than it is to write a home policy.
And we're talking about what's called an HO6 policy. For those that don't know the term, it's something that insures your condo walls in. We're not talking about, there's a master policy that goes with the condos that you pay for out of your association dues or your HOA dues or condo dues, whatever you want to call them. So the walls in are getting more expensive and harder to write.
Yeah, and they're just not even open right now.
Wow.
And the guidelines went up that before, A1, the carriers are still closed, and B2, the carriers that have open are saying like 2010 newer for condominium complexes.
Oh, good to know when you're out there looking at condos.
Yeah, which is tough here in Punta Gorda because we are an older community as far as like homes and condos. I personally can only think of one newer condo community off the top of my head, but so it is tough. I'm not to say that they can't be written.
Right.
They can go to Citizens. Citizens, I will tell you this, is really not bad. You and I had this conversation.
We did have this conversation. I'm glad you brought this up.
Citizens, I mean, I truly think, I mean, during this last hurricane, I would probably say that out of the 20 carriers I have, they were probably like in the top 5 for communication.
Okay.
Payments.
Okay.
Which I think is really big surprise, and people were really surprised from all the negativity that they heard about Citizens before.
Right.
I don't think Citizens is bad. There's a lot of work involved on my end as the
agent
as the agent to get the policy written.
Yeah.
And if you do not know their portal, it can be very tricky because you can get a lot of canceled policies. So I think that agents really put that bad stigma out there about them
because they were having maybe difficult with the portal and things like that.
For sure. And you have to cross your T's and dot your I's. If you do not know that portal and you try to write, you will sink.
Oh.
And so it's tough, but Citizens isn't bad. They just they're good for the basic home. If you have a lot of extras, pool cages, boat docks, things like that, they're not going to cover those. But if you have a home or a condo, they're okay. They paid out big bucks on a lot of my people.
Well, good that they covered their damage.
For sure. Yeah.
So we're getting down to the end of our time, and something that I want to do, this is our first podcast, is ask my guests some questions to get to know them a little better, to make it a little lighter. So one of my questions is, what is the best advice you've ever gotten, Matt?
The best advice I've ever gotten. Truly, it's probably a simple phrase, but it would probably be not to give up.
That's excellent advice.
I know we're run down, but I will say that it took me 6 years to get my insurance license, and that it shocks a lot of people. And it was because truly I didn't give up. I just went back to it. I took a couple years off, went back to it. And I am so glad that I did because it's.
And taking 6 years to get it, but now you're an expert in it. So
I try to be. I try to keep up because.
That was my other question was, what was the last book you read? And this is quite comical.
The last book that I read, I told you this the other day, and this will surprise a lot of people. But I will honestly say that I have never read a book start to finish. I may have started a book.
That's
even
why
in
it took you 6 years to get your license.
In some college, yeah. I've never read a book start to finish. I put it down. I get bored. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. And then my last question is, what movie do you have to watch when you're cruising through the channels? Well, if you see this movie, you got to stop and watch it.
The Breakfast Club. That is an all-time classic.
That is. John Hughes is great.
Yeah. You got Michael J. Fox. All them. If I see The Breakfast Club, I am.
You got Molly Ringwald.
Yeah.
And they had all the classes in school. Yeah, all the groups. Yep. Well, very.
What about you? What movie would you watch?
The Wedding Singer.
That's a good one. Any Adam Sandler movie is really good.
I just love The Wedding Singer. Every time I see that, I have to watch it. My son actually met Adam Sandler one day. He lives over in Boca Raton, and my sister and brother-in-law and him always go to a place for brunch all the time, and he actually happened to be there with his mom.
No
So I
kidding.
got a picture of him with Adam Sandler. Yeah, and he's just the nicest guy in real life. My son was so starstruck he couldn't even talk.
Huh.
It was really funny, but yeah, he took time to meet with everybody there, and then he went, took the time with the fans that were there, and then he went and got his breakfast, and
Wow.
everybody left him alone. So I mean, what a nice guy.
Very cool.
It was very cool. So, well, thank you, Matt, for joining us.
Thank
I
you. I
hope that we
appreciate it.
gave you all some really good information. Matt, give everybody your phone number where they can reach you if they have more questions or they want more information.
If you have any questions with insurance, whether you're my client or not, just give us a call. It's 941-205-0191, or you can visit us at jonesfamilyins.com and check out our website and shoot a question if you have anything.
And
there
what's
too.
the location of your office? It's here in Punta Gorda.
It's downtown at 312 Mary Street in Punta Gorda, by the hospital. So if you get to the hospital, you went one street too far. That's what I always tell people.
Well, thank you again, Matt. You've been a
Thank you.
great person to talk to, a great guest, and I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Appreciate you having me.
You're very welcome.